Good evening. Welcome to my first live posting. I'm Aparna Hegde. I work at Azure Medical as a general practitioner. I'm a UWA graduate from a long time, I won't say how long, and I've been interested in prescribing medicinal cannabis for the past 5 years. I'd love to tell you all about you as a Western Australian, how to access it, if it's right for you, and basically a little bit about the background as well and why it is so much of a topical subject these days. So medicinal cannabis is only new in Australia, but it has been around for 50 or so years elsewhere, and it has been used in a research as well as therapeutic fashion for that time. The issues in the Western world, and particularly in Australia, is there's a lot of stigma associated with cannabis, and in particular the word marijuana was brought in the 50s during Prohibition times to stigmatize it, make it sound more Mexican and therefore foreign. So I like to use the word medicinal cannabis because it is essentially descriptive of what it is. So the government in Australia regulates two different components to the actual medicinal cannabis. However, being a plant-based product, there's actually over 400 different compounds that include terpenes, flavonoids, CBG, CBD, and the THC, which is the psychoactive or the component in cannabis that gives you the high. So the government's only interested in regulating the two components, which is CBD, cannabidiol, and tetrahydrocannabinol, which is the THC. The medicinal cannabis scene in Australia has exploded, but as yet there's only two registered products on the market. One is a GMO-produced CBD, and the other is a nabiximol, which is a THC. So all the other products are not registered on the Australian market, and therefore there's a lot of paperwork involved to try and bring them to the patient. And how that goes is CBD, being a non-psychoactive part of medicinal cannabis, is a Schedule 4 medication, which means that there's less paperwork to do essentially, and THC, being a psychoactive part, has more paperwork involved and is a Schedule 8 substance. It just means the legislation that applies to them is different. So if a substance is set Schedule 8 and contains THC, there's an issue with taking it and driving, but there'd be an issue with taking any type of psychoactive medication and driving. So we wouldn't want you to, for example, take Panadine Forte, which is a codeine based medication, and drive, because it has problems with making you sleepy and making you more sedated. Same deal with the THC part. So now that I've gone through the regulations and the paperwork, what is it used for? Essentially, cannabidiol, which is CBD, non-psychoactive, but has a lot of therapeutic properties. So it doesn't give you a high, but it's used for pain relief, and particularly in inflammatory conditions such as fibromyalgia, osteoarthritis, any type of chronic pain, migraine headaches that are chronic, and being non-psychoactive, you can take it and drive. It doesn't come up on drug testing. I've had several FIFO patients that take it and they've been tested while they've been on site. It doesn't come up as positive at all. The way the CBD works is it binds to the endocannabinoid receptors in the cells. In university, I was never actually taught about the endocannabinoid system, but it's actually a receptor that's found in every single cell in the body. And it gives you the high that you get when you exercise, for example. We make our own cannabinoids in the body, and with that, if you're depleted in some way, it can lead to anxiety or low mood. So CBD is quite often used to address those issues as well. It's been used a lot for the behavioural issues such as attention deficit disorder and autism spectrum disorder, mainly because it does alleviate a lot of that anxiety and the hypervigilance that happens in their brains. What else is it used for? It's been used for reproductive disorders, very strong premenstrual dysphoric symptoms, pain during menstrual cycle, menopause symptoms, because it does have an overarching holistic wellness to it. So as far as the CBD is concerned, very, very safe to take. The only real side effects you get is if it's in an oil, you can get a bit of loose bowel movements because it is an oil that the carrier is placed in. Might have difficulty digesting it. The way the oil is taken is it's taken under the tongue and held for 30 to 60 seconds before swallowing on an empty stomach. That mitigates the effect of having the loose bowel movements. So the other side effect that it can have is that because it's metabolized by the liver, you may get a hold up or a problem with metabolizing other medications that are metabolized through the liver. So it's always worthwhile making sure that the liver functions are monitored when any type of medicinal cannabis is being used therapeutically. So in terms of the CBD, another use for it is the movement disorders. So in children, high doses have been used for seizures and to decrease the incidence of seizures in seizure disorders. It's also been used in adults for degenerative conditions such as Parkinson's that cause a lot of tremor or rigidity, multiple sclerosis for the pain and the fatigue, as well as the movement, the spasticity that can be involved there as well. So lots of different applications, and the beauty of CBD, as I said before, is it's a non-psychoactive component to the medicinal cannabis, very safe to take. It's even been used in very high doses in children. So let's talk about the more exciting and psychoactive component of medicinal cannabis, which is more regulated and Schedule 8, the THC part. The products that are available these days range in different concentrations of THC and CBD. Anything that contains more than a 1% in total component of THC is considered to be a THC medication. So how does the THC work? It's primarily distributed the receptors in the brain, and there are receptors all through the body as well, but it works in a different fashion to the CBD. It still works on pain relief, still works on decreasing anxiety, still works on helping promote wellness. However, it can, as I said, have cognitive impact. It can be sedating. Sometimes we want that, side effects because it's used for insomnia. What is it primarily used for? Therapeutically, it's primarily used for anxiety and panic attack, migraines and acute onset pain, chronic pain, because it's a great pain medication. The beauty of THC is that you don't need, as the body goes and gets used to it, more and more of the drug to achieve the same result, which is called tachyphylaxis, as you get with the opiate medications that are commonly alternatives for pain relief and pain medications that are more commonly used. So I really, really dislike opiates, and most people do in my own pain relief, because I feel like it makes me sleepy but doesn't actually give me good pain relief. Whereas with things like the THC-based medication, there's a fine line, obviously, between getting cognitive effects and being impaired or being high, and the pain relief. So a dose titration is used for that. But in terms of anxiety, there's also an effect on decreasing anxiety, and primarily that's why we use it at night time for people who have anxiety that impairs their ability to sleep. So as far as the process is concerned to get access to medicinal cannabis, it's more and more open these days. Your GP can actually go through the system and prescribe the medication to you. Some are not comfortable because, as with anything new, you have to be familiar and gain experience with the whole process. And quite frankly, it is still a lot of paperwork and hassle. So the access has improved. There are clinics these days that are based solely on dispensing and prescribing medicinal cannabis. There are GPs that only do this particular field as well, and the legislation in WA is such that you don't have to have anything other than the accreditation in order to prescribe it. So there is a difference between an authorised prescriber as far as doctors are concerned and a non-authorised prescriber. So any GP is a non-authorised prescriber, and the ones that are authorised have to go through a process of being able to get the approval through the Therapeutic Goods Administration, this is TGA, as well as the Department of Health in WA, to prescribe the medications. These days it's a lot easier to become an authorised prescriber. So I'll have a question about how much the process costs. The costs have actually come down a lot since the very beginning. When I started prescribing about 5 years ago, it was a lot more expensive, and because there's less of a monopoly and more medications that are available, the process has become far more simple as well as less expensive. So it depends on the product in terms of the cost. In general, there are different ways of accessing it. What we do in Azure is charge the standard consult price in terms of coming in. The best thing is obviously for the patient to bring all their specialist letters, so that it makes the time in terms of the initial consult and follow-up far less involved, and the cost is time-based. We're not a billing clinic, so it's dependent on whether it's a less than 20 minutes or more than 20-minute consult. The product, the pharmacy will charge for a 50ml bottle of oil about $300, and the 50ml would probably last you for 50 days. So that's pretty much how it ranges. But there are now wafers, oils, there's even the flour that can be vaporized. So the cost varies dependent on the products. So in terms of the legalities behind medicinal cannabis and working on a job that does drug testing, so as I mentioned before, the CBD product, which doesn't contain the THC, is actually safe to use, and there's no psychoactive in it, so it doesn't come up as positive with the drug testing for THC. As far as the THC is concerned, it depends on the individual and the organisation that they work for. If they're in a safety critical role, in general, the THC use would not be allowed. And if they were in a non-safety critical role, the organisation would need a letter and indication for what the drug was being taken. Usually the occupational physician that's in charge of the organisation reviews that letter, asks some questions as to how long the person's been on it, what the prognosis is, how long would the person want to be taking it, and what would be the downtime. So with THC, how long it lasts in the body and how long it affects the body in terms of the possible cognitive effects is about 6 to 8 hours. So it works well if the person is taking it to go to sleep, so the following day it's really not impairing the person. It may, however, show up on drug testing well after the person has taken it. Mainly because with regular use it can go into the fat and it can come out in urine drug testing, even though it may not be causing an impact on the pharmacology of the person. So in terms of how you can go about getting more information, so there's a number of different websites these days, and I tend to basically use Little Green Pharma, which has a great range of literature and case studies, as well as testimonials to direct patients to go and gain more information. I also tend to use another organisation that has a good website called Green Lab, and it's a more independent, not based on one particular company website. And obviously when you look at worldwide literature and research, Canada and Israel probably are the countries that have the most experience in therapeutic use of the medication and therefore have the most evidence-based. In Australia, there's a lot of studies being done ongoing. Little Green Pharma, a company I've previously mentioned, has a study that's ongoing at the moment that's collaborating with University of Sydney and is subsidising the cost of some of their products for people that want to trial it. It's a quality of life study, so it's a subjective rather than an objective study. And with that study, the aim is to recruit 50,000 people and follow them up for at least 2 years and see what impact the use of medicinal cannabis has on different quality of life parameters. So how can we help in terms of making it less of an issue for access in Australia? We can lobby our government, both federal as well as local, especially on the rules for driving and the use of medicinal cannabis. In Tasmania, it's now legal to use the THC medication provided the person's been assessed and been shown not to have an impairment on their driving. I had a question about the study taking on people now. Yes, it's Australia-wide, and the study is still recruiting people. The intent is to go to 50,000 people, and they've got to around halfway. So if you do want to enrol, all you have to do is actually Google Quest, and it will come up with an online questionnaire of whether you would be suitable to enrol in the Quest. And it will also come up with a link for different GPs or practitioners that are actually involved with the Quest trial, and you could also go ahead and book into someone that's closest to you. So in going forward, as I said, I would like to see all of us open our mind and use medicinal cannabis without the stigma that's associated with marijuana or an illegal substance. It is perfectly legal when it's prescribed. It also needs other people to come on board and destigmatise the whole issue. We're not in the 1950s anymore. We're far ahead of that, and I believe it's not for everybody, but for those that it does work for, it is life-changing, and we need to keep an open mind. We need to also encourage people to try something, especially when it's something like CBD, which has absolutely no cognitive effects whatsoever, but a lot of potential benefits with very little side effects and risks. Being a plant-based product, it is also something that has fewer effects, and as most people say, they do want to try more natural things. This is definitely one of those. And in destigmatizing, opening it up, it's treated just like another medication, and if it's suitable, then it's prescribed. There's none of this sort of worry and wait and paperwork involved. So I'd like to see a time where more people bring it on and are open to using it, and it's just like another blood pressure medication. If it suits you, then you can go on it. So I believe that's probably where I will leave it. We will hopefully get live again if there's any follow-on questions, and I will answer those in the future. So thanks everyone, and I will finish off now.